Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board. At this time, I'd like the clerk to call the order of our call, make a roll call.
Barnes.
Here.
Chaplin. Here. Delgado.
Here.
Facella. Present. Hannon.
Here.
Nudo.
Here.
Dial.
Here, thank
Quorum
you.
is present.
Thank you. Our first item is the approval of our agenda for today's meeting. After your review, I'll ask for a motion in a second, please.
So, second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve our agenda for today's meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Our next item is the approval of the board meeting minutes from July 27th, 2022.
So moved. Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the open session meeting minutes from July 27th, 2022. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Communications. Carl, anything? Anything from the board? All right, we will move directly into a presentation from TJ Blakeman. I'm going to have Carl just speak to this for just a moment.
Thank you. The city of Champaign asked us to a meeting a couple of weeks ago to get an update on some of their TIF districts, and as a participating agency, they just are giving updates. So this was a staff update, and we just thought as we discussed it, that it would be good for you all to get an update on the TIF districts, because it has both short-term and long-term impacts on the district and its finances. Of course, the short-term impact is that it reduces the collections of property taxes that we have because we don't have immediate access to the increment when there are improvements. On the other hand, there are improvements that are funded by that increment, and so that has a long-term positive impact on property tax revenues. So with that, I am assuming that TJ is on the Zoom, and we can just hand it over to him. There he is, bright and chipper. Hi, TJ.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I just want to apologize. I had every intention of being there in person, but unfortunately COVID hit the household, and so I'm stuck here. And I will apologize in person or in advance if one of those children comes screaming downstairs. I will mute myself and have to take care of that real quickly. But I appreciate your patience. It's certainly something that we wanted to get before your board, because we've got a number of milestones coming up. And as Carl said, we wanted to make sure, we pride ourselves in being good partners with all of our taxing districts on all of our TIF districts. And we want to make sure that we bring the board up to date on the latest on our thinking in regard to what we're doing with our North Campus Town and East University Avenue TIF districts. So because of the technology, I wasn't able to share my screen like I would, but I think you have handouts in front of you. And so these are handouts from a presentation I gave to City Council a week ago. And that video, for anybody who wants to see that, is available on the city's website. But I'm going to run through the same presentation for you and give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. So in general, just real quickly, what is tax increment financing? I'll give you the 2 seconds spiel here. It is a tool. It's one of our most important tools that the city has for economic redevelopment in districts across the city. It works by establishing a boundary around an area that has seen significant decline or ongoing decline or blight. The state gives us the ability to create these districts, but City Council are the government body that is able to enact them. And we draw a line around that district, and we pause, or we create a base of the equalized assessed valuation in that district. And any increase in value over the next 23 years is captured into a redevelopment fund that the city of Champaign administers on behalf of all the taxing districts. So we put that back into the district in the form of infrastructure improvements, direct dollars back into private development, again, trying to prime the pump and make sure that developments are actually happening and doing what the TIF is supposed to do, which is grow Increment so that when the TIF district is over, that increment gets released back and all of the taxing districts benefit. We have 5 active TIF districts in the city of Champaign: our East University Avenue, North Campus Town, North Mattis Avenue, Downtown Fringe, and Bristol Park. Council has given us direction to create the Garden Hills TIF. And so we are in the middle of that process. And this one will become one of the primary funding sources for the city's large-scale flood remediation, along with other infrastructure improvements, roads, sidewalks, and other things throughout the district. And so that is the keystone of that financing plan for the Garden Hills work. But today I want to specifically talk about the North Campus Town and the East University Avenue TIF. At first, we have to look at the East University Avenue TIF, which is our oldest TIF, and it expires in 4 months. It expires December of this year, and the city is planning to allow that district to expire as we've always planned, which would release the increment that's been generated from that district back to all the taxing districts, including the MTD. Of course, the MTD owns a significant piece of property in the middle of the East University Avenue TIF, with its properties to the east of the railroad tracks. We did extend this district in 2010, and at the time we did that, we actually shrunk the district by about 50%. It used to go all the way down to Wright Street and down to Green Street. We shrunk that district and put more of a focus on the core areas around University Avenue and First Street. And at the same time, we surplus back increment that had been generated to help all of the taxing districts through what was a really tough financial time back in 2010, when the Great Recession, the effects of the Great Recession were finally catching up to all of the taxing districts. This district creates about $430,000 annually in TIF revenue that we put back in the district in the form of grants and other infrastructure projects. Our North Campus Town TIF is the second oldest. It is slated to expire in about 5 years. And we created this one back in 2002 to help redevelop the Burnham Hospital site. We had this old city hospital. We needed to clean up the site. There was significant environmental issues. We issued debt. We bonded for about $8 million to clean up and clear the hospital site and make it ready for development, which we did. And so this TIF has been used to pay back that debt, as well as make significant improvements in infrastructure throughout the district. And today this TIF actually helps with the bond payments on the Boneyard 2nd Street, which is important because that frees up debt capacity for the city to tackle other flooding problems across the city, including Garden Hills, among many other needs. And then our Downtown Fringe, which was just enacted a few years ago, has a lot of time left on it. It is just to the west of the railroad tracks. Illinois Terminal sits in this district. We started this district to focus on turning our attention to the areas outside the downtown TIF that hadn't seen reinvestment. And at the same time, the yards was in conversations. And so this became the funding stream for use on the yards, as well as all the other priorities on the fringe of downtown. So what we've proposed to City Council is to make some changes east of the railroad tracks. We know the East University Avenue TIF is about to expire. We recognize that. We're going to allow that to happen. But we also realize there's a lot of need that still exists in that area. And I'll show some of that in just a little bit. So we're proposing to amend the North Campus Town TIF and grow its boundaries to encompass the old East University Avenue TIF, along with some additional properties that we feel are important to have some tool at the ready. That includes properties further along North First Street, along the Boneyard Creek, and down at the intersection of Springfield and First Street, and actually in pulling a small little piece over to the Illinois Traction and the Inman building, just because as the yards continues to move forward, we realize that those are two properties kind of within the area of the yards that we had drawn out of the TIF back in 2017, and we want to put those back in so that when the yards is built, we have tools for Market Street and Bailey Street and Walnut and University around those properties, because we know there'll probably be impacts because of the yards that we need to address. And so we are looking to, like I said, just to recap, bring the East University Avenue area into the North Campus Township along with some of these additional areas. So if you're looking along, if you got your packet in front of you, the green area there on the slide would show the new North Campus Town TIF. But because it only has 5 years left on it, we would also at the same time, we're going to seek General Assembly approval to go ahead and extend that TIF the additional 12 years. So that would give us a new expiration date of February of 2023 in order to really tackle some of the remaining issues that we have across this district. So some of those projects, the first one that I highlight in the packet is the Boneyard Creek improvements. We are close to completing the entire Boneyard Creek project, which has been about a 50-year project from start to finish. At the end, it'll be a 5-mile walking trail along with all of the flood relief that it offers areas downstream through Urbana and further downstream. The section in blue is the next phase to be built, which is from Bradley Avenue down to Washington Street. And the section in red, though, is a phase that is still to be planned for. And with the cost, with the increasing cost, with pressures on our stormwater funds for other projects, we could realize some challenges in completing that last 4-block section, which would be critical to actually uniting and unifying all of the sections that we've worked on for the past 50 years. So that's the reason why that additional land is being proposed in this TIF. And you'll see that on the next page. The yellow parcels that you see on that map are parcels that are owned by a government agency or otherwise non-taxable. So my point in including that is to demonstrate that even though we're planning to include a number of properties north of the existing East University Avenue TIF, many of those are owned already and not tax generating properties, meaning it won't have any kind of a larger impact on the other taxing districts. We are continuing to see a growing number of large-scale vacancies throughout the district. That's no surprise. Dallas & Company's closing, Brian Knox's buildings next door, the Ducky's building, First Street Antiques, just to name a few. When you look at the map there with the buildings highlighted in red, it shows the amount of ground floor vacancy there. It's becoming quite an issue right in the core of this area along University Avenue. So we'd like to have the tools in place to try to combat that, and as we make further improvements, attract new retail and new commercial activity into this section of Midtown.
TJ, I think we're maybe missing a slide here.
What's that?
We don't have what you're talking about with the publicly owned buildings highlighted or the ground floor vacancies in red.
You don't have a page. It'd be page 14.
Ours ends at page 10.
Ends at page 10, so you don't see anything that I'm talking about.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Yeah, TJ, all we got was your memo to the council.
I sent Beth the presentation from the study session. I certainly will get these to you.
We can do that.
Sure. Let me think about that for just a second. Do I have the capacity to share my screen? I was under the impression I would not have that capacity.
We'll have to ask our tech staff here for
Oh,
a second.
there we go.
There we go. How about that? There, we're seeing it now.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so there you see. Okay, so getting back to the vacancies. Actually, if you go back to that previous slide, I'll just kind of highlight. Yeah, there you can see the yellow properties that are non-taxable, and then the white hashed area is the proposed extension of the TIF. Okay. So on the next slide, there you see the large-scale vacancies, some of the buildings that we're seeing that are now empty, and you can keep going. There's that map illustrating. You know, it's certainly becoming an issue there in the 0 and 100 blocks of University, especially on the south side of the street. Next slide. In terms of other infrastructure that needs to be taken care of, some of that is generally overlooked. You know, back in the 1990s and early 2000s, when we rebuilt nearly all the streetscape in downtown Champaign, one of the things we did was underground a number of utilities. It helped beautify the area, and it actually helps to make redevelopment of lots a lot easier. We're actually having issues right now with the Avenue building, and how close that picture there on the left is just how close some of those utilities and things are to properties that are being redeveloped. That's making it very challenging. Next slide. And then we have infill needs. The loss of C Street. There's other larger properties, especially as you get south of University and west of First Street. There's plenty of opportunities for infill redevelopment. This is the old C Street building, which we lost in the windstorm. And so there are plenty of opportunities to grow increment through infill, and those are pretty plentiful throughout the area. Next slide. We have a number of roadway and pedestrian safety improvements that we still want to get to as University Avenue continues to grow with activity, as we hope it does with the addition of the Boneyard Trail. We are going to have to make improvements to help people get across that street safely. And that's not the only street. We have a lot of oil and chip streets, especially in that same area where south of University and west of First Street. A lot of streets that are just simply oil and chip, lacking a number of the modern infrastructure that you would find in an urbanized downtown core area. Next slide. And then one of the biggest ones will have a direct impact on the MTD. This is the South Downtown Relief Sewer. This is probably the most pressing issue on our plate with these TIF districts. This is the sewer that's going to alleviate capacity in all of downtown, but more importantly for you, it's the sewer that will directly link to the yards, to the Illinois Terminal Expansion Project, because we are at or very near capacity in our sanitary sewers in downtown. So we need a relief sewer, and the plan for that sewer was had been over the past 2 years as we've been planning on this, but we've been looking at different routes. Some of those routes have kind of fallen through, which has delayed the project. We've been waiting to hear on state grants, which we did not get. And now we're in a situation where the project isn't going to be built until after the East University Avenue TIF expires in purple. And the way it's planned for, the plan of finance calls for each of the TIFs to proportionally pay for its share of the sewer as it crosses them. But with the expiration of the East University Avenue TIF, it leaves us in a bind. We wouldn't have the funding or the capability to spend the money on the section there along Springfield Avenue. So next slide. Actually, let's keep going. One more slide. This shows that new TIF in green. So once again, the sewer would be in a TIF. And before the TIF expires in November, we will port the money. We will transfer the money that we have saved up for this project to the North Campus Town TIF, so that now the TIFs will once again proportionally pay for their shares across each of the districts. That previous slide is just an example. Obviously, we've done this kind of project before. Logan Street is a perfect example. We were able to make some pretty significant improvements not only to adding the sewer, but to the sidewalks and the roadway. In this, we will be forced to make some of those improvements because we'll tear up some portions underneath the Springfield Avenue viaduct. This project does not include a full rebuild of that viaduct, but it will include the rebuild of the portion it affects, which will primarily be on the north side of Springfield. So even though it's a state route, we will end up footing the bill for that. But it will create better access from campus into the downtown area along Springfield Avenue, along with the sewer. Next slide. And so this was, as of last week, council did give us unanimous direction in a straw poll at study session to move forward on the amendment of the TIF and the extension through the legislature. So our next big steps will be in September. Later in September, we'll do a public meeting, and then we'll really get into all of the requirements, the state requirements, the notifications, setting the public hearing date, the joint review board, which MTD will be invited to attend. And ultimately, it will culminate in a public hearing and the adoption, and we hope for that to be sometime likely around the first of the year. And I think that's it. The next slide was just simply a holdover. Last point, PGAV is our consultants. They're working with us hand in hand. Council authorized a contract with them earlier in the year. Then they are our consultants for the next 5 years, working with us on things like TIF creation, and different analyses and projects. So they're working on both the Garden Hills and the North Campus Town TIF. And I think that's the last slide that I had. So I would be happy to answer any questions you may have, take comments. I can certainly take those back to our team.
Any questions from the board for TJ? Go ahead, Phil.
Hey, TJ, obviously I'm extraordinarily conflicted on this one, but I feel like, when you went north of University Avenue, you guys really did carve out around and avoid the privately owned property sort of to the east of the new basin. And I feel like, I own most of those immediately adjacent. I think my property values are going to go up quite a bit, and the taxes I'm going to be paying are going to go up quite a bit because of the work you're doing here. What was the reason for leaving those out and not trying to capture that increment into this new TIF district north of University?
So you're referring to the properties you said to the east of the Boneyard, kind of between
Let's say between Washington and University.
First and Second.
Yeah.
I think most of that was just a recognition that they're mostly residential properties and that our TIFs, for the most part, now I say this even though Bristol and Garden Hills are predominantly residential. The problem with those TIFs is that residential properties don't tend to, by their nature, they're not increment generators per se. And so I think we were just simply trying to avoid areas where we didn't think there would be active commercial projects. Now, we can certainly take that back and ask the question about, going straight down. I'm not sure what street we would go down. If we'd go down 3rd Street or it may change the requirements as we move forward. I know that when there's a certain percentage of residential properties within the TIF, it does change some of the approval processes that we have to just to go through. But I mean, in general, it was mostly to capture the properties, to do two things: capture the properties that it would be immediately needed for the Boneyard improvement, and number two, include the rest of North First Street, which has never been in a TIF and needs to be in order for us to make a more significant improvement in the commercial district.
I think you should consider some of the stuff along 2nd Street. I mean, I wouldn't be against doing some development there in 5 or 10 years. This is a pretty long-term thing, and I think we're going to see a lot of changes there once you're done with that project.
Okay, I appreciate that.
TJ, I've got a question.
Yes.
Suppose a current private property owner decided, in the view of this, not to do any maintenance on their property for several years. and then do it all at once. And that would be in the deferment or not?
So when the TIF is created, that base is, the base EAV is whatever the EAV is on the date that the TIF was created. So any work that they did after that base was created, the increment generated from that project would be recaptured in the TIF for use in the TIF. I certainly think if someone intentionally sat on their property and deferred maintenance without doing it in hopes that somehow the city was going to come in and help them on a project, well, that certainly would not be guaranteed, and that would be a fairly risky move on their part, especially if they were pretty egregious in intentionally deferring the maintenance. I think that would be taken into account when, if any assistance was being asked for to fix up their property. I don't know if that's kind of getting to the answer that you were looking for.
Sort of. I'd also noticed the Esquire is not in the tax increment financing district.
It used to be in the downtown TIF.
I'm being trying to be funny.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we carved out the at the time the thinking was that the downtown has had 30 years in the TIF district, and it has done well. We've managed to do a lot to stem the tide and invest in buildings. And so that was intentional on our part to really put the focus more on the fringe of downtown than the core.
Additional questions for TJ from the board? Margaret?
I've sort of been putting things down on my pad as you've talked along, but could you be a little bit more specific about what the various impacts would be on the MTD and its operations?
Well, from an operational standpoint, from a moving of buses, I don't think there would be much of an impact, except I think there could be some positive impacts. Sorry here. One of those projects that we hope to get done is, and we've talked to your leadership about trying to signalize the intersection of First and White. That would, as MCOR improved White Street, getting across First Street can be a challenge. That's something with the terminal expansion that we're going to take a look at. So that actually could be a real positive that would be paid for out of the TIF. Otherwise, I don't think, again, including that little section that kind of juts into downtown, I think that could be of benefit to your operations because it would allow us to use TIF funds on some of the street reconfigurations around Bailey and Market that weren't included in the downtown fringe. So I think that's beneficial. But that I don't think from an operational standpoint there would be much of an impact. From a district standpoint, from a financial standpoint, yes, this certainly it creates a new base. We will be releasing the increment generated from East University Avenue, so there will be a bump in your properties on the tax roll, and that growth will come back as new growth. So that will be good. And then ultimately, if we're successful in getting the projects done and turning this district around, at the end of this TIF, it will be of benefit to all of us, city included, MTD included, because we will have made the area stronger. We'll make it working, its market conditions working better, and we will have improved infrastructure and building quality and across the entire district.
Anything else from the board for TJ?
I had a question about.
Pull your mic down a little closer there. You can't hear you. There you go.
I had a question about what were the characteristics determined that resulted in this block having so many businesses that closed up. I know for Dallas and Co. The shutdown was a huge impact for that, but I'm curious about the other businesses that shut down in the area. Is it related to accessibility, where the business is just not popular? was there any like surveys done for that?
Well, I can speak to that. I suppose anecdotally. Dallas and Company. I certainly think trends in costume and party design, Amazon, and the pop-up stores at Halloween have certainly impacted their business. I don't want to speak for them. They made that decision as a family and as a business to close their doors, and we were sad to see them go. They've been an anchor for 50 years on that corner, 40 years. So that is certainly one that you can point to and say, yeah, I'm sure COVID had a significant impact, but I think there were probably others. The buildings next door, the retail building that Brian Knox owns, has been vacant for a very long time. I think GQ Hue, there was a men's clothing store, was the last store, and I think that closed up maybe 10 years ago. So that's just been a situation of tenants of the property. It likely needs some improvement and brought up to date. But that would be a question for the property owner about leasing those spaces. Some of the others, the Avenue building, again, long vacant, probably 15 years or 20 years. The building was falling in, and fortunately we were able to help them out with our RIP grant program, and that building has been completely rebuilt. So I think I wouldn't necessarily say I couldn't really point to one thing that's caused this sudden increase, except for that things just kind of caught up with building conditions in the district. It is still a fairly strong street for retail. We probably have more retail in this stretch than other parts of downtown, but we'd like to see even more of that. And Restore is about to move their location, and I know there's been a lot of talk about what happens with that building as well. So I can't really point to one thing, but hopefully we can make some improvements that make the area more attractive for people to want to locate their business here.
All right, thank you, Brianna. Additional questions from the board on TJ's presentation? Seeing none, you have anything you want to wrap up with, Carl? TJ, thank you for your time today. We certainly appreciate you offering this information to our board, and we'll look forward to council action on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thanks. All right. I skipped over audience participation, but we don't have any audience, and I'm assuming that, Beth, you haven't received any correspondence from anyone.
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll just go back and touch on that. Next on our agenda is the Managing Director's report. Carl.
Thank you, Chair. We will be talking about July with this summary report. July is the first month of the fiscal year, so all of our year-to-date information will be identical to the monthly information, since it's month one. And in July, there were 290,301 rides, and that is, just for comparison, it's still down 31% from 2019 numbers pre-pandemic, but it's up 11% from July of last year. So we are still seeing a crawling back from the depths of the pandemic. And I have a note in here. The staff pointed out that as we recover, the increment of the recovery likely is going to get shallower and shallower. I mean, to some degree, that probably seems obvious because it has to, because we are there's less room to recover, but also just as time goes on and people start getting used to being out in the public again and going to events and going to classes that are in person fully this year, that kind of thing. It's going to be bit by bit by bit. So, to some degree, I think we have to exhibit some patience as we recover. But then also, we're still only at 80% of our regular service level. So, we're kind of not ready for ridership to fully rebound because we don't have the capacity for them yet. I want to point out, yeah, year to date is the same. Actually, if you go stop there, yeah, breaks. Okay. Year to date, there is an error in your board packet on page 30 on the FY22 year to date number. That should be the same as the July number, which you see here as 290,301, but there's an error, a typo in that. We will get that updated, put that in the board packet that'll be memorialized online, and we can email you a copy of that. So apologies. Okay, now we can move on to the next one. Yes, this is just showing you a little more of a snapshot. You can let me know how long you want me to keep showing you this particular view, but I find this to be a useful view, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about, that our recovery is getting a little shallower as we progress through time, but we are moving back to the pre-pandemic numbers, so slowly but surely.
Carl, were
Yes.
you talking about on page 5?
Am
how
I
the,
talking?
year-to-date revenue and expenses went down?
Sorry, say that again.
On page 5, how the year-to-date revenues and expenses declined.
I haven't gotten to that section yet, but
sorry.
yeah, if you want, when I get there, I can try to open that up a little bit
I gotta
for,
quit looking ahead.
yeah, you're one of those students.
Yeah.
Okay, and now we can move on to the operating revenue. Just finishing up on the ridership. Operating revenue was 21.3% above July of 2021. And so, of course, the year-to-date was 21.3% above 2022 also. The operating expenses, which I think you were asking about, Bruce,
Yeah.
they were 2.6% below July of 2021. And of course, the year-to-date also is 2.6. And so you're asking why are we down when wages, salaries have increased?
And ridership and so on.
Yeah, so generally speaking, our expenses don't really correlate very closely to what our ridership level is. You know, just for a discussion point, if we have 10 buses out, it costs X amount of dollars to run those 10 buses. And whether we have one person riding on those 10 buses or 10,000 people riding on those 10 buses, it costs X amount to run those 10 buses, right? So the expenses don't really correlate to ridership. So that's one thing.
Revenue went down too, same time.
Revenue went up. Revenue is 21% above what it was last year.
So I'm looking at the bottom figure on page 5.
Okay, yeah, I haven't gotten to that yet. That is what our actual revenue and expenses are relative to what our budgeted revenues and expenses are. So catching up to you, if we're on that section, then just to put a number to it, as you see on the screen here, our revenues were $196,000 below budget, and the expenses were $705,000 below budget. The expenses are below budget primarily because we budgeted for 100% of service, and we are only at about 80% of service levels. And so we're going, I mean, even with the rising fuel costs and insurance costs, and we have lots of things that are rapidly increasing, until we get back to our 100% service level, our expenses are not going to match our budget. But we budgeted those amounts so that we would have funds available to build back to that 100% level.
It's the budget that you're comparing to, I'm sorry.
Correct, yeah. Okay. Moving on from there, I just want to point out in the notes, I have a little piece about the triennial review, and then following in your board packet, following my summary, is the actual report from the Federal Transit Administration on our triennial review. I just want to spend a minute talking about this. This is a I always want to call it an audit, and the FTA really pushes back hard against that. They call it a review, not an audit. But it's kind of an audit. They come in every 3 years, and they look at every aspect of our operations, of our finances, of our procurement, you name it. It's really comprehensive, and there are 23 specifically defined areas of compliance review. So they're looking at what we do and how that complies with the federal regulations. And a general triennial review audit nationally, so every urbanized transit system in the country gets these triennial reviews from the FTA. And on average, there are 7 findings per triennial audit. And we had 2. So it wasn't perfect, but it was, we didn't hit the bullseye, but we hit the target, and we were maybe in the one ring outside of the bullseye. It's a really good review, and I want to stress that because there was an article in the newspaper that kind of made it seem like we were doing things wrong. This review was a very positive review. The reviewers took a lot of what we exposed them to, our processes, our forms that we created, and they are using those as examples of best practices to show to other transit systems that they're reviewing. So it was an excellent review. We had 2 minor findings, and we've already corrected one. It was something very quick and easy to correct. The other one, we have a little more time. It's not due to be corrected until December. It has to do with our half-fare cab program. And you know, quite frankly, we staff may be bringing to you, the board, to have a larger conversation about the half-fare cab program at some point, because while I think that we can get in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act as it relates to the half-fare cab program, it is getting more challenging to do that, and we might get to a point where we have to talk about, is this something that we can continue to do and comply with federal law, or do we just call it a day on that program? So we're not ready to have that conversation yet. We still want to, you know, give our best efforts to continue the program and comply with regulations. And so Evan Alvarez, our Special Services Manager, is on top of things and working diligently to get us to that point. It's somewhat related to the VIA contract that you approved, I don't know, a couple months ago, a month or 2 ago. And when that's fully implemented, then we'll see how that works and how that impacts our operations. And then we'll be able to bring data to you and have a cogent conversation about that. So just a heads up, the review was very good. We got lots of compliments. And the one area that we still are working on complying with, we'll report back to you on how that's going and what the long-term result of that might be. Yes, Bruce.
So they actually send people here.
Normally, yes. So this review that we just had done this year in 2022 was actually scheduled for last year, and we were still in the, you know, the throes of the pandemic, and so they canceled them last year, the last 2 years, and pushed them out to starting back up again this year. So normally we have the reviewer who is a consultant to the FTA and members from the regional office in Chicago of the Federal Transit Administration that would come on site. This year they didn't do that, so they reinitiated the reviews, but they were all virtual reviews, and so it was all over Zoom that we did it, which was weird and interesting, but it worked, and so yeah, this was a virtual review. But we still had to do a data dump to them and just upload through the cloud, I don't know, gigabytes of data. I'm probably exaggerating, but a lot of data to them to review. With that, thank you. It's hardly has anything to do with me. It is all the great staff that works at MTD that you have employed. So thanks to them. With that, I'd like to give I'll give just a little primer, and then I'm going to turn this over. Excuse me, turn this over to our new corporate counsel, Alex Parker, to introduce himself to you. As I know you all are aware, but I guess for the public watching this, our throngs of fans on YouTube that watch these videos, we have contracted with the city of Champaign for the past 9 years for legal services. And this year, because of their own employee shortages, the city of Champaign said, can't really do that anymore. We need to buckle down and focus on our own legal services, and so we're not going to contract out to other agencies anymore. So we took proposals from a variety of legal firms and selected Meyer Capel, who Alex Parker is with. And Alex has, even before he was with Meyer Capel, with the previous firm that he was with, Alex has done our work with liability claims for 10 years. I'm probably stealing your thunder, but a long time now, probably maybe, yeah, I think longer than 10, 15 or 20 years. I don't know. A long time. And so we felt very, very comfortable with Alex. He has been a great resource for us, and Meyer Capel has a very, very deep bench of attorneys who specialize in different areas of law, real estate, employment law, all kinds of different areas. And so I just want to give Alex a moment to introduce himself to you. Some of you haven't maybe had an opportunity to meet him yet, and so now you get to. Alex.
Thank you, Carl. Again, Alex Parker. First name is Alyx. My dad screwed my life up with that spelling, trust me. But I live with it. In any case, yes, as Carl said, I'm with Meyer Capel. I'm a shareholder there, have been since 2000, been with Meyer Capel since 2016. And it is actually 16 years that I've been doing MTD work on the liability side of things. Even during that time, however, I've also provided some direction and advice on other issues as well for the MTD. So I was very excited for the opportunity. And as Carl mentioned, Meyer Capel has a broad amount of attorneys with a lot of specialties, employment, real estate, transactional, all those things that while I am the primary contact for the MTD, there are other attorneys at Meyer Capel who, for efficiency's sake and to keep costs down, are going to be asked to address items and have already been addressing several items there. So, so we try to streamline things as much as possible. Happy to answer any questions and look forward to continuing the work.
Question for you, Alice. How familiar are you with the federal laws regarding MTD?
I mean, over the years, I have gained a good familiarity with them. In this new position, I am continuing to gain that knowledge. I have already met with Carl, Jack Waller, with respect to this transition. Jack has given us great guides in terms of doing that, and basically reviewing as much as I can to make sure that I can answer any questions or address issues. And also, as part of that, I'm aware that there are certain deadlines over the year where reports need to be made to federal agencies, things like that. We will continue meeting those deadlines as they have been in the past.
Thank you. How about the economics of this business? Does it come into play in your advisory capacity?
It really depends on, I think, what Carl would probably want us to look into. I am aware that, I mean, a number of our transactional attorneys have extensive involvement in all sorts of corporate taxing types of issues there. So that may not be me who addresses that, but if somebody, if it's something that I feel that someone else in my firm would have that knowledge, then I will be getting them to do it. As I said, I want to put the best person on the job to be as efficient as possible.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. We appreciate it. What else do you have, Carl, for your report? Anything?
Thanks, Alex. Your parents condemned you to spelling your name for everybody, and I have to tell everybody it's Carl with a K. So I'm with you. With that, that is my report. And if you have any additional questions through page 54 of that report, I will take those.
Anything for Carl from the board? Seeing none, we have no action items this month. So our efforts here today are complete. Our next meeting will be September 28th, 2022 at 3 o'clock right here at the Illinois Terminal. This time I will thank our advisory board members for being here today and our new MTD attorney, and ask for a motion and a second for adjournment. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. We are adjourned. Enjoy your evening. Thanks.